I didn't really understand why. I was like, well, why for all of the rest of the population, just because you're not a Division I athlete, why do you have to settle for something that is so subpar to the experience that I had?
And I know you started, we were talking about in a sort of a single clinic as part of a gym, and now you have something like 15 clinics. So how has that influenced it?
I always think of the word potential. We want people to walk in and automatically think of the potential beyond their current circumstances. So
What has been probably the most successful implementation of AI, you think, in all of your operations, your clinician workflows?
I think with regards to the AI and tech in the back office, revenue cycle management, there are so many things that are just so tedious in that space where if you're able to set up certain things that are a little bit more algorithmic in nature, you're able to free people up, again, for those higher cognitive load work items.
Well, Josh, thanks so much for joining us here in Mountain View. Excited to chat over the next little bit, and maybe just start with your background. I know you were a lacrosse player growing up in the DC area, is that right? So maybe just talk to us about that, what that was like, and how you got into therapy.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me on here. Really, really appreciate it. It's very cool just to see what you all have been able to create here, both as an entity before Cumure and then obviously afterwards. I look forward to learning more about the product and seeing you all's impact on the healthcare world. But as for me, my background, like many PTs, honestly, you have an identity as an athlete throughout a large majority of your life, and you get to a point in time, and for me, that this was in college, where unfortunately I had my first major injury. And I got to experience the sports medicine side of sport that I had not previously encountered. I'd been very, very fortunate growing up. I played 8 different sports before playing 3 sports in high school, and then eventually playing lacrosse in college. But never missed practices, never missed games. And my sophomore year of college, somebody told me that I was going to need to get shoulder labrum surgery after tearing my labrum and rotator cuff while playing lacrosse at Ohio State. And that identity shift pushed me into the wide world of rehabilitation and going through a process that overall I enjoyed tremendously during my time there. As people can imagine, a big athletics environment, you have access to a lot. People, education, knowledge, resources, and you're receiving something that I quickly realized was in stark contrast to the rest of the population. I came home for the summer, and that was my first A/B test, right? We talk about A/B testing all the time in marketing, for example, and that was my A/B test of PT, and they were very, very different than each other, and I didn't really understand why. I was like, well, why for all of the rest of the population, just because you're not a Division I athlete, why do you have to settle for something that is so subpar to the experience that I had? And that's kind of where I got the idea for Rehab to Perform. When I was in college, I was able to rehab. I was able to spend time with a strength coach. I was on field. There was this continual blend, and you were just kind of changing dials as I went throughout the course of the process. I felt very, very connected. The practitioners and people that I was working with were able to speak the language of the athlete. The facility and the equipment supported everything that that I needed to be able to get back to really what anybody's trying to do, which is perform. And that's kind of where the name came to be. Rehab to Perform. You want to help people perform in the ways that matter to them, knowing that everybody has a season in whatever aspect of life that they're in, whether or not it's work, life, activity, vacation, sport, etc. There's a lot of things that matter to people, and it's up to us to figure out what we can do to help them perform.
And how has that vision shaped how you've built your organization? I know you started, we were talking about in a sort of a single clinic as part of a gym, and now you have something like 15 clinics. So how has that influenced it?
Yeah, I would say overall you're trying to first really start with like the psychological framing of when somebody walks in, right? So you have a person. They've largely viewed healthcare as a have-to experience previously. They've largely associated with things that probably are a little bit more medicalized, a little bit more sterile, maybe a little bit more like a hospital environment. And then you're thinking about the places that people choose to go to that get to experience which is a lot of times for people a gym or a fitness community. There's a lot of different concepts out there, but we've largely pulled inspiration from not just sports medicine or athletic departments, but also the fitness community. Because at the end of the day, when people walk in and they do see a big decal in our waiting room, you're not here to rehab, you're here to perform. So instead of them thinking about all the things that they're not going to be doing, or the limitations, or the reduction of whatever it is that they're typically used to from an activity standpoint, they're seeing turf. They're seeing equipment that they would typically equate with pushing themselves. I always think of the word potential. We want people to walk in and automatically think of the potential beyond their current circumstances. So again, the psychology of when an individual walks in, what the environment looks like, really doing what you can to make it experiential, and for people to ideally be in a situation where they want to come back because they view that whole experience with you as a get-to experience. And that's a lot tied back into, my experience rehabbing as an athlete, where I was like, hey, this is not the most unenjoyable thing in the world. I enjoyed the process. I saw it as a means to an end. I knew where I was going, but overall, as a result of all those different touch points, it made a process that could be, a significant disruption to somebody as being one where I still felt connected to the previous goals that I'd had.
And what made you feel compelled, if we take it back to the start, in becoming an owner, right, of running your own business? Because I'm sure you had a lot of options in terms of things you could do. So I'm curious why you picked ownership.
I think that I've always been in a variety of situations where it was just going to happen for me at some point in time. I think whether or not it was, starting a paper route during early years of my life, where my mom helped my sister and I get access to delivering the Wednesday paper in the local community, mowing lawns, doing swim lessons, doing lacrosse camps, clinics, lessons, and stuff like that. I think I've kind of always had that entrepreneurial spirit. It was just a matter of trying to figure out the best vehicle to put it behind. And, I'd always been somebody that enjoyed working out. I'd always enjoyed being in the gym. I enjoyed, the element of practice, right? Showing up on a regular basis, physically improving yourself, mentally improving yourself. And I would view business very, very similar to that. Looking at this opportunity, really where I felt like there was a significant void in the community that I grew up in, which is honestly where, that's where I started the business, right outside DC, in the county called Montgomery County, Maryland. I wanted to have the impact on so many people that I felt like needed this, that would not have otherwise had the access to if I didn't start up R2P.
How did you figure out your identity? Because I think the way you describe it is quite unique, and probably the first time I'm hearing something like this with all the PT groups that we work with. And so very unique. Did you know it from the start? Did you build it over time? How did you figure it out?
I would say early on, you're just trying to really put pieces together. So you're trying to think about something that you had through your experience, and you're not quite sure how to package things in the business world. I knew how to differentiate on the service that people were being provided. That was about all that I could say. And I knew that I needed certain things for people to be able to touch or use that reminded me of my experience at Ohio State. But it's not until you're in it and you're making mistakes on everything from the front side of the business to the back office to revenue cycle management to even simple things like communicating a plan of care, retention, churn rate, all of these different touch points that really, you don't get a full appreciation for until you're in it. Because I didn't have a significant business background. I happened to just be very, very good at sales or communicating an expectation that people should have and then fulfilling upon it. But I'd say overall, you get better and better at handling your ecosystem. You pull inspiration from a lot of places that are more innovative than the healthcare space, largely. I think for me, the fitness space early on, and now, I've had multiple conversations with people that I never thought I would feel like a chief technology officer, but now, this connectedness between fitness, rehab, and the tech space. You're trying to create an ecosystem that's as frictionless as people, as could be, for people to, get that special sauce that you remember from your college days.
It's interesting you talk about on the outside, it may look like things that are going really well, right? And I'm sure they have, but internally, I'm sure there's a lot of things that you're like, I wish I knew this before I started, or, for folks listening that want to shortcut some of the learnings, here are things that, you should look out for, you should know about. Anything you can share there?
I think for me, I probably just should have dabbled more in schooling related to business when I was in a situation where you're supposed to be learning. Undergrad, graduate school, a lot of times you won't get a lot of business in whatever professional program you're in unless you're getting an MBA. I don't know why I didn't do any kind of a business minor or something. Looking back on it, I had to be very, very resourceful to use my own time and money outside of those avenues, whether or not it's SCORE, Small Business Development Center. Goldman Sachs had an amazing program called the 10,000 Small Businesses Program that was very, very pivotal for me earlier in my journey. I mentioned SCORE already. There was a free business mentor. I mean, that's still something that people can go out and get. It's just a matter of how resourceful you are. I think I had to be more forcible with regards to resourcing my deficiencies. Two things early in business: you're ignorant and you're naive, right? So you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know a lot, and it's up to you to really come up with a system to kind of determine, where are the bottlenecks, where are your shortcomings, where is the area where you have a low-hanging fruit, where is something that if you do pour all of your time and energy on this is going to move the needle the most. Fortunately, I've been pretty good about those things to date, but certainly, I would recommend to people earlier in your life where either you're working on other people's dime, or you're in situations where there is more formal structure in place, to take advantage of those opportunities.
Got it. That's interesting, and also just have to compliment, how hard it could have been to just pick it up from scratch and to build the business. So very, very impressive. As we move maybe a little bit more to the business side of running Rehab to Perform, how do you think about the economic landscape of running a PT group, a PT clinic, a set of PT clinics with reimbursement pressure, with rising cost, with maybe 50 other things that you think about? What's your mental model on running a business there?
I think there's two big things, right? You have your internal economy. So really largely that's the things that you can control. And then you have external economy, which is things you can kind of appreciate and consider. And I think for us, not trying to be too cliche, but controlling the controllables is always the best place to start. So, if you're talking about your payment environment, how much cash, how much direct pay do you have in your environment? Can you increase that? How much insurance do you have? Can you look at your payers and potentially make sure that you're maximizing, or at least ensuring that the sessions you're delivering are documented in a way that are reimbursed at the highest possible levels? Do you need to cut contracts? Do you need to go and renegotiate with some of the insurance carriers that you work with? Do you need to do things to look at clinical to non-clinical staff count, right? Is there certain ways that you can take on international staff or AI or automations? Is your EMR very, very, is it tech forward enough? Knowing that we are going through a rapid period where there are so many new updates and gadgets and widgets and all these different things out here. If we talk about AI, that can really, really minimize the need for a human to be doing certain things. And then you have the external economy. I think the biggest thing that we're talking about now, and it's sometimes we feel like it's just in healthcare, but it's really not. But just the cost of education has gone up tremendously, and I think it's outpaced wages in a lot of different professions. So that is something that is regularly on our younger clinicians' minds, knowing that they're going through a period of, where they're probably reevaluating whether or not this is a good decision quickly. They're graduating with more debt than ever. And you have situations where people are looking at ROI in healthcare, whether or not the ROI is there. So, you're taking on those internal consideration, external considerations. You're trying to make sure that you're creating an environment from an employer standpoint where There are certain, things where you're competitive in the financial landscape. You're providing, whether or not it's the CARES Act program, which is set aside for student loans, or if you have a student loan 401k match for the people that maybe don't view it as being something that they're eligible to pay into, where if for anybody that doesn't know, that you can match them on their student loan payments instead of them having to just pay into 401k. I think going back to the insurance side of things, we've been very, very fortunate where I know a lot of people talk about reimbursements decreasing. We've gotten to a point in time where we have a little bit more negotiation as a result of scale. So we've been able to change the conversation there and significantly help out our staff really over the last 2 or 3 years as we're covering a good amount of what is known as the DMV. And I think our commitment to excellence, being able to show outcomes, those are things that are very, very important. So we're talking more about successful discharge, getting multiple data sets with patients, looking at overall lifetime value, course of care. How many times are they're not readmitting to us, but they could be ideally, coming back in for different things and not the same things. How are you decreasing overall burden financially for the overall healthcare landscape? And these are things I think that are only going to continue to be strengthened as we continue to move forward.
If you had to spend, I'll give you a hypothetical. If you had to spend a week thinking about your business and you could spend time between growing top line or improving margin, right? In terms of where you are as a business right now, what is more important to you right now?
So I think the mechanics of profitability are probably the biggest place. And I say that because I think we have relatively repeatable processes with regards to growing top line. Growing top line in a brick and mortar business involves opening new locations. And if you have certain things in place with regards to your engine there, then you're probably better off allocating a disproportionate amount of time to the mechanics. And I think largely the mechanics that we're focusing on the most are in the back office. So the non-clinical side of things. Can we, quite honestly, allocate more revenue that we bring in to our clinical team? And can we do that in a way by ensuring that our clinical headcount continues to far outpace the non-clinical headcount, at least compared to previous years? And the more that we can do that, it probably involves more automation, AI, tech, potentially some international staff. And you're trying to make sure that you have the most competitive back office environment so that your clinicians can do what they need to do. And at the end of the day, regardless of any kind of outside payer changes, policy, regardless of your insurance cash mix, you can solely compete because you have a more efficient mousetrap.
Got it. Really, really well said. How do you think about, you're a pretty large at this point independent group, right? And I'm sure you've seen consolidation. I'm sure you've had friends that have gone through consolidation, and I'm sure, especially as you get bigger and bigger, that just becomes something that's on the table, right, as you scale up. But there is a lot of value in being independent, and I'm sure that's why you continue to be independent. Curious how you think about that trade-off and calculus in your head.
Yeah, we went through a couple years there where I think we're viewed as being very appealing to kind of be like a tuck under or kind of like a roll up candidate. I think we've kind of outgrown that a little bit. And some of that's just through having conversations, respectfully declining, and moving forward and having a certain amount of confidence about who we are, what we do, what we're bringing to the table. I think we're able to look at year over year. Obviously, things like top line with regards to just consistent percentage increases, staff retention. If you're able to look at things like online reputation, outcomes, stuff like that, we feel like we're doing a tremendous job. So we have a provider-led company, and I think if you look at certain situations where maybe non-providers get a hold of service-based healthcare companies, the data isn't very favorable, right? If you lose sight of the main thing in those environments and you're largely looking at a more numbers-based decision-making process as opposed to a human or people-first decision-making process, I think that's where healthcare can kind of, lose that directionality, lose that original North Star. So it's not to say at some point we might get to, a situation where maybe you resource on maybe a more minority level to get some support, knowing that there's always blind spots and places that providers don't have strengths. But I think when it comes to the clinical care, when I think it comes to what is going on that is both serving team and patients, especially if we want to be the best employer brand and consumer brand, that providers have to continue to be at the forefront. So it's also something that we're finding that candidates are asking more and more. It's not to name any names on here, but there's been more than a fair share of things in the PT space that have been somewhat public in recent years that haven't gone well. And it's actually allowed us to recruit some of those people that have been pretty jaded in environments where things have changed drastically as a result of the individuals who are leading those companies changing quickly from people that hold a professional license, a healthcare designation, to somebody that maybe is associated with more of being a bank.
I was going to actually ask you a bit later, but probably good time now. As you think about recruiting talent, it's probably one of your biggest rate limiters as you scale, right? Especially really good clinical talent. And I'm sure you already have a lot on the team, but I'm sure as you continue to scale and increase your footprint, is that true that continues to be a rate limiter, or do you get to a point where your brand's big enough that's actually not the rate limiter, and it's more how do you think about these proportions and how do you think about setting up your team in the optimal way?
It's a great question, and I think it's one that we fortunately got on top of a ton during the pandemic. So it's no secret that was a crazy time for people to kind of reevaluate how you were doing things. In our space, right outside of DC, had some pretty significant restrictions. So your day-to-day is drastically different. You have more time to do certain things that you didn't normally get to do, right? All of your people-facing things were really just reserved for a select few patient interactions. Your community work's little, you're not meeting with people externally. So it's like, all right, how do we do the internal work? And for us, we viewed that as an opportunity to view talent acquisition, much like a marketing funnel, right? So what kind of top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, retention, advocacy strategies for talent. I think a lot of healthcare businesses only do that from a consumer lens, and they don't do it in terms of building out, a full funnel for talent. And I think that's something we did really, really well early on. A lot of that is grounded in our internship program, high school, college, DPT students. We have contracts with I think it's over 160 or 170 universities all across the country. We will host over 150 DPT students this year. Our summer internship program at the college level is huge, and it's something we put real intent behind. It's one thing to have a contract in place and to host people. It's another thing to provide them with asynchronous touch points ahead of time and during. It's another thing to potentially even allocate a role in your company where there's office hours or presentations. We also take all the students to APTA headquarters because it's close by where we have our locations. So an ecosystem of different touch points to really make sure that it's the best student experience possible. Outside of that, we feel pretty strongly that social media is something that will continue to be a very, very important part of that. Yes, you can view that as a marketing engine for the consumer, but how do you also showcase workspace, right? How do you have an appealing consumer brand? If you're putting meta ads behind direct-to-consumer marketing strategies, then why not also put it to direct to employment strategies? So we're doing different things to showcase certain employees who maybe were in certain environments or certain stages of their career. Maybe it's early stage. Maybe it's I've been working for 10 years and I needed a refresh. So trying to give a behind the scenes look at the psychology of people that maybe who have chosen us through various times. Because 5-6 years ago, we were, just kind of like a up and comer. I would say that we're a little bit more established now as a known commodity, and I think it certainly gets a little bit easier. And again, I think if the providers continue to have a pulse on what matters, I think we'll continue to create an environment where the retention and advocacy side is a significant piece for us right now.
Yeah, I mean, that is a pretty remarkable investment with the university partnerships and the internships. And it's pretty clear to see, I'm sure you have a pretty heavy pipeline, right, as you think about expanding. So it makes a lot of sense in terms of investment. As we stay on the people topic, how do you think about retaining your best talent? Because, I'm sure that you have, I'm sure you have all of your talent's great, but I'm sure there's certain talent that is exceptional, right? And how do you think about retaining them, keeping them incentivized, keeping them motivated, ensuring that they are, with you for the long run, right? Which is, I'm sure, what you want.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing for us, it's like, all right, well, you have a physical therapy company, right? And then people go, you have a marketing company, right? Okay. And then you have a staffing company, right? There you go. That's probably your big three, right? Yeah, yeah. And then I think for us, it's really creating an opportunity where you can have entrepreneurs have their own company. So we've created kind of like a clinician CEO model where people have some investment that they have to sweat into to earn increased financial upside at the offices that they help us open. We love qualifying people in our environment for what we have is like a three-part plan, three-part program to allow them to open a rehab to perform in a community that they're either intricately invested in now because they live there, and or the person that might have grown up there and also wants to open a location there. Those are best fits. A lot of companies will choose a location and then go look for talent. We want to qualify our talent first and then choose the locations. So we're able to look at our roadmap with regards to location openings and pair those with people that we already have, which allows us to shift people that have already been with the company. They know the culture. They know how things are supposed to see, look, feel, and it's so much easier for them to then go into these locations for us and us not to have this dilution of brand or dilution of the service being provided as a result. So how do we get on top of that? A lot of that's being a great listening company, right? So making sure that we're looking at not just KPI dashboards, but actually setting aside real time to have one-on-ones, real time to push out forms, potentially look at actual like feedback forms and then set up meetings after that. But if we're a really, really good listening company, we feel like we're going to stay on top of that. And again, it's not just your objective dashboards, but it's also listening to the people telling you how much they love the company and how much they would be interested in an opportunity. And then at that point, it's up to you to kind of come up with a path forward that allows them to, be ready.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I'm sure that keeps them long-term invested as well. Um, I think as any organization gets bigger, it becomes tougher to maintain that culture, right? And part of it is listening, and I think there's a lot that goes into it. And I'm sure it was much easier to maintain the culture when you were just that single clinic or two groups, and now you're 10 times that size, and you're going to continue to grow. What are other things you do to really preserve the culture that you want to carry across all of your clinics? Because you can't be at every single one anymore.
No, and I think, going back to the entrepreneur model, I think that's a big part, right? Where you have a certain amount of discretionary effort that was already being given by people. Then they feel like they have real upside in taking care of the thing. So I think that's really a great place to start. I think being very, very transparent about what it is that matters, right? It's no secret. Mission, vision, values. It's one thing if they're on a piece of paper. It's a whole nother thing if they're on everything, even pre-recruitment, pre-hire, if they're in throughout the course of your onboarding process. For us, are they a part of High Five Fridays? Are they a part of our annual R2Ps, which is kind of like the ESPYs every year where you're rewarding certain people? So what you communicate matters, has to be reinforced in decisions that are made, has to be reinforced where unfortunately you have to have uncomfortable conversations with people. But these are little things that I think come back to something that we will refer to usually as like quiet permission slips. It's how many quiet permission slips is your company willing to allow to have happen? And if you continue to give out quiet permission slips, then you're pretty much saying that the guardrails or the floor that you put in place for people to, be able to join you don't matter as much. So then what happens, getting back to what we were talking about earlier, you have a certain amount of dilution in place, and then bigger isn't better, right? Bigger is just bigger. And then you grew at a cost instead of growing with intent.
And then on the inverse, what are things you do to prevent burnout of clinicians, right? Because that is naturally going to happen. Curious what you've done there. I'm sure you think about it all the time.
It's a continual topic. And I will say that it's multifaceted, and I go back and forth on a wide variety of different things that I think are contributing to it. Some we can control. A lot of people have been burnt out by different scenarios where if you look at the history, especially from a PT side, we went from best business model to recognizing that the absolute best business model comes at a cost to your people. Then if you look at the best service model, you have a situation where you have a variable service being provided, and you have things that are not repeatable. That's not good business either. You could have a session that is longer in time, that is the exact right amount for the consumer, but it's 32 minutes here, 57 minutes here, 17 minutes here, et cetera. That's just not good for anybody because there's a lack of predictability. People like predictability. They like operating in models that they know they can repeat. That level of familiarity and predictability tends to give people a lot of comfort in terms of how to approach their workday. So what do you need? You need best blend, right? So you need the best blend of not the absolute most productive, most money-making, but you also can't have this like variable, laissez-faire approach to whatever goes and whatever in the moment. So that sweet spot, looking a little bit more at averages, looking a little bit more, quite honestly, and I don't think they do it anymore, but like Google's 80-20 rule is something I reference regularly. Can we have 80% of your day generated to patient hours? And can we have about 20% of your day related to self-care, self-development, or sometimes just taking a breather? But you have 20% not directly patient-facing. That's kind of been a nice North Star framework for us to follow. We think it allows clinicians to show up on a regular basis and at least for the bell curve, do really, really well. Where a lot of times on our yearly like workplace wellness or work-life balance surveys, they're reporting things very, very high. You need to have paths though for your high achievers. Like you need to have paths. Otherwise, high achievers don't like always kind of sitting back a little bit. And they want to know if I could work harder, what is in it for me at this company? A lot of times people will find themselves in that entrepreneurial role, or they just need to have significant financial upside where if they take care of their patient caseload, then they're okay. I do think there are other societal factors. I did mention them earlier. I think the cost of education is still weighing on a lot of people. And I think if you're a young person and you are not having to rapidly handle the thought of two mortgages or a rent payment and a comparable payment earlier in your professional journey, it probably would sit a little bit easier with people. Where I do think, and I hate to use the word despair, and that might be a little bit exaggerated, but I think some of them kind of look at how am I ever going to get over these hurdles? How am I ever going to reach certain milestones that my parents did? What am I going to potentially have to do? I feel like I'm never going to be able to catch up. So I think the external, internal dynamics are incredibly important to look at. I also think we've talked about work-life balance and burnout so much that I don't know how much we've just ruminated on the topic for like decades at this point in time. And I think sometimes people will have a hard time combing through, what's reality? What is, what am I supposed to feel? Is everybody feeling this? Is what I'm actually feeling like, a season to my life? Is it all the time? And then sometimes you just need a change, right? You probably just need a change. Like sometimes if people are truly burnt out, like you probably need to change something. But I think the blend of changing things professionally, you might also need to change your self-care strategies. You might also need to change your self-care routine. You might need to change your relationship with your phone. Digital hygiene is very, very important, right? You might need to change your workout routine. You might need to look at sleep. You might need to look at your social circle. There's a lot of different things that I think come down to either things that will fill up your cup or potentially burn you out. And I think the more that companies are having conversations with employees to view them as an ecosystem that needs to be accounted for in a wide variety of different ways, the better off the employees are for it.
A lot of insightful, I think, comments there. So thanks for that. Maybe one of the final topics that is worth talking about is on the technology piece, because you mentioned that one of your more recent roles is CTO of your own company, right? So I'm curious, what are some of the most exciting technology investments that you've made or you're looking forward to make as you think about the transformation, especially with AI and language models? They're iterating at a pace that we have never seen in history before. I'm curious how you think about it.
I think the simplest way to view it is, quite honestly, if I have a person doing a certain task or workflow, and it can potentially be taken over by technology, is it worth us exploring that? Because at the end of the day, there is a people component that is needed everywhere. For us, we feel strongly that that is the actual service being provided. But if there's a front office or back office task that we don't have to worry about onboarding and retention, we don't have to worry about inconsistencies of a people element, and it does allow us to take care of the whole reason why we have the company to begin with, which is the physical therapist, those are the decisions we're trying to make. So the other thing to think about too is even with your front desk, it's like, can they be more tech enabled? You might have entry level positions, and if they're more tech enabled, they're going to naturally experience burnout less. They're going to have more consistent performance. They're probably going to be able to stay 2 places rather than 3 places. We think of the phones a ton. Phones are significant disruptors, right? So if we can get to operation no missed calls, I mean, imagine that in a healthcare environment where there's absolutely not a single missed call, and you're able to scrape some of these very, very time consuming, scheduling an evaluation, 5 to 7 minutes for your average front desk person. And you're able to have technology take those things on. You're allowing them to spend time on higher cognitive work, right? Which generally is more fulfilling. You're allowing them to stay a little bit more people facing. And you're honestly able to scrape out these, like, I don't want to say like they're less human important elements to your business. And if anything, you're able to humanize your people even more because they're able to show up better in the person-to-person interactions that matter most.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the calls. We've spent a lot of time there on these autonomous call centers, and we can talk about that after as well. And I fully agree with you. I think like 30 to 50% of calls can be fully automated. Need no person in the loop. They can be the escalation path that kind of take the questions that an automation can't, or if someone just wants to talk to a person, they can. But you're totally right. I think something like 30 to 50% of calls is what we see that require no human in the loop. What has been probably the most successful implementation of AI, you think, in all of your operations, your clinician workflows? Like, what are you the most proud of that you've put into the practice? Or is it that you are still looking for that?
I'm going to go 3 places. One, the amount of self-service scheduling, and it sounds so simple, just putting things in the hands of the actual person receiving the service. So those are very, very simple. I know that's not AI, but that's allowing a technological innovation to first step remove people. I think with regards to the AI and tech in the back office, revenue cycle management, there are so many things that are just so tedious in that space where if you're able to set up certain things that are a little bit more algorithmic in nature, you're able to free people up, again, for those higher cognitive load work items. Documentation, another significant place. We are so pumped with where we're at from a documentation standpoint, where we have most notes getting done under 2 days, and honestly, it's closer to 1 day, which is unbelievable. I mean, you talk about not having clinicians take notes home, which is one of the major complaints. The innovations that are at their fingertips that allow them to get things done sooner are incredible. Phones. This is not an endorsement. I know it can't endorse anybody, but on the phones, we had 15.5% of initial evaluations entirely scheduled by AI last month. Like, that is significant. We had over 1,000 cancellations processed by an AI phone. So things like that are like real data points where, again, all of those we could probably argue are not skilled, right? They don't have tremendous variance. It is, this person wants to do A, we're going to go to step B, we're going to go to step C, we're going to go to step D. So you're able to free up people, you're able to put them in a position where honestly, you're humanizing them more as a result of allowing them to have this tech stack that works in unison with them that allows them to show up their best self. There's nothing worse than thinking back to the early stages of the business where you didn't have an automated text message for missed calls. You had a clipboard and pieces of paper for your intake forms that you're having to upload and fax in. You're having to manually, honestly, I remember a place I worked at where there was paper documentation soap notes. You talk about your payment windows from insurance companies. If every single soap note that you have to go through has to get sent out, potentially even via snail mail or via fax. So the amount of efficiency just over the course of my time as a business owner has been tremendous. I know you give some data points there, but it's really affecting us everywhere from front desk to back office to the provider level. We didn't even get into marketing, but it leaves me very, very exciting. And at the same time, also always like tempering expectations because tech fatigue is real. The cost of potentially having a misfire on a product that maybe you chose, having the team go through a pilot and it is a massive flop, and we have had that happen, is also something that does happen. So you get better about your due diligence process, and you make sure that you're vetting companies appropriately. It's also important to have like a pulse on your team, like, hey, how are we doing, right? Hey, we want to do this in Q3, but are we actually ready to have that conversation? Do we need to push this out on our roadmap a little bit? Do we need to let the team just run for 13 weeks and just operate and kind of, take a breather? Those are regular questions that I just never thought I would have to have.
What are places where you feel like it may go too far? Places where you're like, I'm not ready to put AI here, or you're, to your point, a misstep, right? Of like, you thought this was the right thing, but it really isn't. Are there things that you think of, or do you think in a future world, actually everything that isn't high cognitive load, to your point earlier, can be upgraded?
I am envisioning a world where you have a tech aid or some kind of like Swiss Army knife robot in the clinic that has AI capabilities. You're able to speak to it. You're able to ask it to do certain things. It is doing everything from home exercise program completion to potentially able to, communicate or coach or tweak certain things in the clinic that allow you to potentially offload some of the, let's say, front of service or back of service steps, right? Going in, greeting people, potentially bringing them back, serving as a, dare I say, almost like a medical assistant in the rehab world, right? Where it was just, in an appointment, you spend time with the medical assistant. They do a couple of the early intake questions. They're relaying stuff to the surgeon, and so on. So I think in the rehab space, and I say this because I know text aids are such a point of friction. It's constant turnover. It's really challenging to have consistency there. I think that would be a significant value add, and I think that would be a place where you're experiencing robotics and AI in a way that at least hopefully is viewed as being like a high value add. I'm a little bit apprehensive to push off clinical reasoning to AI, especially as I use more of the AI products, and you have to push back sometimes on some of the things from a strategy standpoint where you're like, I appreciate your insight, but like, I think I know this topic and I understand the context surrounding this topic like better than the AI model. I could feel differently in the future, but I think offloading the reasoning, especially behind a healthcare service, would be something that I would definitely exercise extreme caution around. And I think, in the PT space, a lot of people are getting worried about digital health, right? They're getting worried about like the Sword Health. They're getting worried about Hinge. They're getting worried about Thrive, these different products that are being associated with some of the insurance carriers. And I think people, no matter what, will still search out in real life. Like the IRL stuff is not going anywhere. Like the word experience is not going anywhere. But if we potentially put ourselves in a position where we negate the importance and the skilled side of clinical reasoning, that's where I think we find ourselves being replaced. And that's where I think sometimes you could have dare I say, somebody maybe is approaching work a little bit more lazily, entirely outsource their thought process to something not human.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about robotics. Being out here, there's so many. I'm sure you're.
I saw the amount of Waymos, like
the amount
just
of
driving.
Waymos,
Yeah.
and there's all these just robotic companies that are actually coming out with robots to help you with things. You just hear about a new one every single week. So, we see that, like we live that over here. So I fully resonate, I think, with what you're saying. Final question that I have for you is, what's your read on where the PT space is going over the next couple of years? So you spoke about your clinic and what you want to do. How does that compare to where you feel like the demand for PT, the services that you'll continue to provide? Talk to me about the landscape in the industry.
I think there's so much white space for us still. I think that we did such a poor job, though, from a consumer brand standpoint for so long with regards to having services that were maybe viewed a little bit more modality heavy, a little bit more passive, a little bit more stationary. So I think companies that are very, very intent about brand and the rebrand of what physical therapy does, what problems it solves, what its intended to do for people, not just short term and long term, is going to be incredibly important. I think that we will have more and more discussions, especially when you talk about like cash pay and diagnostics around longevity and health span. Yes, we can do rehab from injury. Yes, we can do rehab from surgery. Yes, we can help people through different pain patterns, et cetera. But what are we trying to do big picture? We're trying to maximize the performance that people have in all aspects of their life. So I do think getting into the diagnostics of not just living a long life, but living a well and highly capable life are things that people should be exploring. And ideally, continue to position ourselves as like the best conservative option in the healthcare space. If you don't want a surgery, if you don't want a prescription, if you don't want a shot, go to your PT first. Go try to find a path forward, a plan, some change to your process with the physical therapist. You're probably not going to have any downside to that conversation, right? We can look at shots, surgery, and prescriptions, and we can say that there's probably a side effect to every single one of those. The side effect to trying PT is little to nothing. So making sure that we're viewed as a little bit more of that first choice provider. You'll see us shifting a little bit more into primary care roles with regards to screening and assessment. And I think largely that the potential for PT is endless. It's just up to companies that actually want to take on the rebranding of what the profession should be and can be, and ensure that they're meeting consumers where they're at. We've been under the, shadows of probably physicians for a long period of time. I think we can say with direct access over the last 10 to 15 years, that's been changing, but not nearly enough. And the companies that continue to think forward and think about the word potential, I think of the ones that own the future of PT.
Awesome. Well, Josh, thanks so much for the insights today. Really, really enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.